Welcome to Creating Connections for Successful Member Recruitment, a webinar for AmeriCorps VISTA leaders. This session looks at how VISTA leaders can use connection and relationship building to assist in recruiting VISTA members. We'll look at specific roles that leaders take on during the recruitment process, and we'll examine how connection plays into that process. I'm your host, Stephanie Hunter, and I'm the Training and Development Specialist at AmeriCorps VISTA headquarters. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our main speaker for today, who is Andy King. Andy is a Senior Training Specialist here at VISTA headquarters, and he plays several roles in supporting VISTA leaders, not only through this webinar series, but also through his work on VISTA leader orientation and at developing resources for the VISTA campus. Andy, welcome.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk about how you, as a VISTA leader, can build on your existing connections and create new ones to attract people to apply to serve. Leaders are important players on the recruitment team for their VISTA project, and you play a variety of roles on that team. One key role is connecting and bonding with potential applicants, providing a human connection during the sometimes complex recruitment process. So let's get started by looking at our agenda. Here's what we plan to cover in the webinar. We'll look at how making connections with potential applicants and growing those connections over time can be the foundation for a relationship that can carry through into the service year. We'll have a chat activity to engage with this concept. We'll explore how tapping into existing and new networks can aid you in your recruitment efforts. We'll give time to think about and identify your own key networks on a worksheet as a first step in helping you spread the word. You might want to down the worksheet now. It's part of the handout. So have it now so it'll be handy when we get to that activity. There's a link for it there in the chat. And next, we'll look at how you as a leader are uniquely poised to support recruitment just by the fact of who you are and what you bring to the position. We'll have a Jamboard reflection activity for you to engage in this section. And then finally, we'll look at appropriate roles leaders take on throughout the recruitment process, as well as ways that you can deepen connections with your applicants along the way. We'll have a chat question in this section as a way for you to share some ideas with your peers. So let's explore our first concept and talk a bit about what it means to make connections over time and why that matters for recruitment. Let's start with some foundational information about how connections can relate to the recruitment process. The first key idea is that recruitment is interpersonal. Successful recruitment often relies on connecting with a person, not an application, and connecting with them repeatedly over time. There are lots of ways to connect, of course. It can happen in person, electronically, over the phone, or even through a shared contact. You may want to mix it up, keep a variety of efforts available to you so that you can keep people engaged. Next, making a connection is a bit like planting a seed that, with care, will grow over time. As a leader, you should plan to connect with potential applicants multiple times throughout that recruitment process. These touch points might start out as brief contact, but they can build into deeper connections over time. And finally, as a leader, you can offer personalized support and guidance to candidates throughout the recruitment process. Your consistent support and engagement can be the basis of a relationship that can sustain the candidate between the time they're selected and then they actually start to serve. Connecting throughout the recruitment process allows for a gradual development of a relationship. Let's look at some key stages of connection that can lead to relationship building. First, there's initial contact, when individuals first get in touch with each other And as we've seen, this can happen through a variety of means, whether you're meeting someone in person or online, over the phone, or maybe you're introduced through a mutual contact. If both individuals have a shared interest or they're interested in getting to know each other, the connection can move into this phase of mutual interest, where there's often a communication exchange around whatever that interest might be. Next, continued contact is the period when individuals begin to communicate more frequently. This is often a place where understanding and knowledge will start to develop and where a foundation of trust can be built. From there, shared experience or context is the next phase in this continuum. Continued contact and communication can develop into these shared experiences. Bonding is the next level. It's where individuals begin to care about and have a concern for the well-being and the professional futures of the other person. By this point, you probably know more about each other, including your strengths, goals, and needs. And at the far end of the continuum is commitment. And that is, of course, when individuals commit to some type of relationship. So taking a look at this, does this continuum of connection align with anything that you're doing as a leader? Stephanie's going to introduce a quick activity to get your thoughts.
Thanks, Andy. So to get a sense of the types of connections that you're all creating, we have a quick poll, which is going to pop up on your screen. So when you're thinking about your role as a leader, and specifically about your role in terms of recruitment, which of these connections have been part of your work as a VISTA leader? Go ahead and select all that apply and then click Submit to Answer. All right, I'm seeing the answers coming in now. All right, it's looking about half to 2/3 of you have answered. So thank you for everyone who's participated so far. Make sure you go ahead and get your answers in the next few seconds. We'll keep the poll open for another 15 or 30 seconds or so you can get your responses in. All right, it's looking about, we have about 80% of folks on the call who've participated. Thank you so much for submitting your responses. I think we'll go ahead and close our poll. So Andy, I'm interested in what you're seeing in these results. To me, it looks like initial contact and continued contact seem to be some of the top answers that people have responded with. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, although actually the percentages are pretty high across the board, at least 60%, somewhere between 60 and 80% in all stages of that continuum. So I think that in and of itself is interesting. I had no idea what to expect here. I thought, maybe things would trail off towards the later part, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So it seems like a lot of you are involved in, in your work as a leader from the very beginning, making some of those initial contacts, maybe doing outreach to make that happen, or maybe you're the point of contact for your project. So if folks are interested, you're the one that they get in touch with. But then you're taking an active role in many of the other phases, moving down that continuum towards commitment. So interesting stuff here. It sounds like this relates to what you're doing. So I'm glad to see that as well. So thanks for participating in this activity. We next have an example that was shared with us by one of your peers, another leader. So let's take a look at that.
Yes, so to help you all start thinking about how you might apply some of these ideas, I'm going to share an example of how a fellow VISTA leader worked in their VISTA project to make connections with people who might be interested in serving with the project. So this example comes from VISTA leader Libby Gramlich, who serves with the Community Action Network in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So each year, the Community Action Network forms a recruitment committee to help recruit VISTA candidates for the coming summer. So the committee invites interns and staff of the organization to join the committee if they're interested. And one key role for the committee members is to reach out through their own personal networks to help spread the word about VISTA service opportunities. So the interns typically share information with classmates and professors in their university departments and through their friend networks. And the interns can also provide an entry point to the university listservs and job boards, which sometimes can be hard to access. So they typically reach students in social work and education programs, as well as in art and design programs. Entry to the Masters of Social Work program tends to be competitive, and a year of VISTA service can give students a chance to further their professional development to make them more competitive. And the Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award helps too. For other grads, serving with VISTA gives them a chance to figure out which direction they want to take in their career while they're doing something that's meaningful for their community. So to make the process more interesting for committee members, the organization also offers a $100 gift card to those who refer someone who joins as a VISTA member.
All right, thanks for sharing that example, Stephanie. Great to hear some of the practical ways that this is getting put into play. So let's talk a little bit more about networks. And one way to go about making connections is to use your existing networks to reach people that you are already connected to. Another way is to extend your reach to new people and to new networks that might benefit your recruitment efforts. So first, consider school networks like high school or college contacts that you've gathered over the years. Maybe you belong to an alumni association or a Greek or fraternal organization. Also consider your job networks. And those are made up of organizations and people that you've worked with over time, as well as any professional groups or associations that you might belong to. You likely have networks of service-minded people from your prior Peace Corps or AmeriCorps service, or from places where you volunteered. You may also be associated with local groups connected to service and volunteering. Consider national service alumni networks, such as AmeriCorps alum. Your networks are also likely to include, of course, your friends and contacts who have shared interests or hobbies. Are you part of a recreational team, an activity club, some interest group, or an advocacy organization? You may be part of networks relating to your stage of life and your family situation, things like parenting groups or caregiver groups. And finally, in this personal realm, consider networks that relate to your beliefs, like a faith community, as well as to racial, ethnic, or identity-focused networks. You're probably building your new networks right now during your service. Leaders typically have contact with a whole variety of people in their day-to-day, like sponsor staff and community leaders. You likely have access to networks through your sponsor, including their board members and volunteers, as well as community partners, not to mention the members on your own team. And finally, consider whether you have networks of the population being served by your project or by other community organizations. For example, if your project focuses on addressing needs of refugees, you may know the nonprofit leader of another refugee-serving organization, and they have networks that they can reach out to. You may be familiar with the concept of concentric circle recruitment, or sometimes called ripple effect recruitment. And this is a strategy for broadcasting your recruitment message to ever widening circles. Small circle on the screen represents you and the recruitment team at your organization. And each successive circle represents a broader network of potential recruits. The more diverse the networks, the more diverse the people you will potentially reach. And we are all part of various people's circles. Many of the people in your immediate circle are probably pretty similar to you. So there may be someone there who, like you, is interested in VISTA service. And whether they're interested in serving or not, they can spread the word to their networks, which probably includes some different people. Your contacts likely understand what you're looking for, so don't hesitate to ask them to spread the word widely. Also, don't hesitate to consider connecting with people at the far edges of your network. Those people who are natural connectors, who know a lot of people. By relying on your personal networks and recommendations, organizations can potentially find candidates who are a good fit and who likely have a vested interest in the organization's mission and success.
Okay, so now we're going to take a few minutes to do an activity together so you can put some of these ideas into practice. In the chat, you'll see a link to a handout that includes a worksheet for this activity, and you can download it and then type into it to follow along with this activity. So we'll give you a minute to grab the worksheet from the chat if you haven't gotten it already. And if the list of potential networks on the previous slide got you thinking about your own networks, that's great, because now we're going to give you a few minutes to write down the networks that you're a part of. So in your worksheet, you want to include the existing networks that you came to your VISTA position with, as well as the networks that you've developed since you began serving. Remember that these can be personal networks or professional networks, or people that you know from school, your jobs, service, your friends, or family. Your networks could be connected to service, or they could be connected to you in some other way. We're going to give you 1 minute to complete this activity. All right, so I did see that there was some struggles in the chat to get the handout link. That's okay. If you have a piece of paper with you, you can use that to just start listing down the ideas you have for your current networks. And now we're going to take some time for you to go a little bit further in that brainstorming as well. So if you have the worksheet, underneath each of the network sections, you'll see that there's a circle for where you've identified your networks. You'll see a space where you can write down the name of a specific person you think could be helpful in your recruitment efforts. Identifying a specific person can help you to move from the broad idea of a group of folks to help with recruitment to more specific action steps. So we're going to give you a chance to jot down your ideas for specific people who can help with recruitment. And again, if you were not able to access the handout, feel free to jot down your ideas on a separate piece of paper that you have with you. All right, thank you everyone for working on that activity, and thank you again for your flexibility. I know we didn't get to spend a lot of time here, so we encourage you to come back to this activity after the webinar if you want to continue brainstorming. But for now, I'm going to send it back over to Andy.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. And again, apologies for the link not working for that handout. We'll make sure that we have that ready for you. And if you were registered in advance, you may have gotten an email yesterday with that document as an attachment. So, all right, so let's move on to the next topic in our agenda. And that is, we're going to highlight some unique or advantageous aspects about VISTA leaders that gives an edge in recruitment. So as a VISTA leader, you're in a unique position to connect with potential recruits from the outset. One thing that all leaders come with is that they have previously served, whether that was with AmeriCorps or Peace Corps. And the graphic shows that the vast majority of leaders, some 82%, have prior service with VISTA. The other benefit you have is that you are an AmeriCorps member yourself. So the fact that you've served before and you currently serve with VISTA gives you a different level of credibility when you're speaking with potential recruits. What else? Well, leaders bring additional experiences and knowledge from their prior service that also position them for success. That includes a deep understanding of the AmeriCorps program, its goals, and the impacts and benefits of serving as an AmeriCorps member. Leaders also know what it takes to serve, so they can use this knowledge to guide recruitment messages and conversations. Leaders can speak from their own experience about the personal and professional benefits of serving in AmeriCorps, including the education award, the work experiences that you receive, as well as networking opportunities. As I mentioned, you have credibility and you're likely to be trusted. AmeriCorps leaders are seen as knowledgeable and trustworthy resources, and potential candidates might be more likely to trust the advice of a leader when considering whether to join the program. Leaders often have a decent amount of time in their role that's dedicated to recruitment. An analysis we did of sample VADs found that 78% of VISTA leaders engage in member recruitment activities. And while it varies by project, of course, leaders are often engaged throughout the cycle of recruitment, and that can account for a large portion of their overall duties. Having more time to focus allows you as a leader to enhance your recruitment systems and processes over time and to develop good practices, and then have the time to actually focus on those tasks.
So now we're going to use a Jamboard for this next activity because we want to give you an opportunity to share some of your experiences with each other. We're going to gather your ideas and make them available after the webinar. But for now, you can see in the chat the link to the Jamboard. To add an idea to the board, go to the left-hand menu and click on the icon that looks like a sticky note. Then you'll be able to type in your idea in the block that appears. You can change the color if you want, and you can move your note around the board. And if we run out of room on the first page, you can add notes to the second page by using the navigation arrows at the top of the screen. So what we want you to think about here is to remember back to your first service experience, whether that was with AmeriCorps or with Peace Corps. There were probably some key people connected to that service opportunity that either encouraged you to apply in the first place or helped you with some aspect of the application process. We want you to share, what did those key people do early on that helped you to feel connected to the project? You'll have 3 minutes to jot down any ideas you have, so you can share actions, advice, or any other forms of help that made a difference in your process of entering service. And if you run into any trouble with accessing the Jamboard, just let us know in the chat. All right, thank you so much for sharing all of your responses. I'm seeing a lot of really detailed and really interesting responses here, and some themes are standing out from what I can see on the screen. But Andy, I'm interested in what stands out to you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for getting all these ideas here. I think that there's some creativity here, like camping out. That sounds really engaging. That is like far down the commitment spectrum, if you, in my book. But I think some of the themes here is there was a really personal and individualized connection that was made, right? So that people felt like it was specific to them and that their needs were recognized and they felt supported. There's also a very practical element to it that, there were specific resources or information that were useful or were maybe connected to, to a need that was expressed. So those are a couple of things there. And then also just, in a way of relationship building that we talked about a little bit earlier, that, with time, there was this development of trust and ease, or feeling welcome and feeling comfortable and respected. So that came through as well. So as Stephanie mentioned, we will gather these together, put them in a document, share that out after the webinar. These are really a lot of great examples here. So thank you for your participation in that. So that activity brings us to the last section, where we're going to look at the many ways that leaders can engage with the recruitment process. We'll also be sure to highlight the ones that fall strictly with the supervisor in their role. So AmeriCorps has outlined a 6-step recruitment process to help guide VISTA projects to organize their recruitment efforts in an effective way. Many supervisors are familiar with this model, and you may be too. So we'll use it to frame ways that leaders can support recruitment throughout these 6 stages. And those 6 stages or steps are plan, market, screen, interview, select, and engage. And we've overlaid here the different stages of connections that we looked at earlier to help us move from that initial contact to commitment. So in the early stages of recruitment, you're making that initial contact, exploring possible areas for mutual interest. And then with continued contact, you're building those shared experiences or contexts. So by the time you get to the interview step, that's where applicants often start feeling a bond with the people that they've been interacting with. And then they're in a position where they can decide whether this is the right place for them to make a commitment. The recruitment process starts with planning. So that's always a good first step. And during this stage, leaders can work with the supervisor to develop a recruitment plan that includes things like the number and types of positions that need to be filled, as well as the skills that are needed. In this step, leaders do things like drafting a recruitment timeline and recruitment messages. They can also help the project director draft the service opportunity listing that goes into My AmeriCorps. But of course, leaders are not permitted to create VISTA positions or to post those opportunity listings. That responsibility lies with the sponsoring organization. And so for each of these steps, we want to highlight several ways that leaders can build and deepen connections. So in the planning phase, leaders can look at their networks for ones to potentially tap. Leaders may want to see if any current members want to do another year of service, or if they have any contacts that they think might potentially be interested in VISTA. The next recruitment step is marketing and all the activities that are part of this stage. Typical tasks for leaders are coming up with marketing strategies, thinking creatively about their target audience, and then tailoring the recruitment messages to attract a variety of potential members. Leaders also often update the marketing plan to make future efforts more effective. And in terms of creating connections, you'll of course post on recruitment sites and social media, but you'll also be sharing to your networks, right? And starting that concentric circle process. Your members can help here as well, because they can help spread the word through their networks. And if it seems appropriate, you can prepare to provide an information session about AmeriCorps VISTA service, or attend events to make new connections, to share more about the project and the positions available. Following up with potential applicants who reach out to you is key, right? We feel that in the continued communication piece. And doing that shows that you value their time and their interest in serving with your organization. The third step is screening. So once you've spread the message and candidates have started to come in, you'll want to start screening the applicants. This should include checking eligibility as well as suitability for the particular role. And it's important that diverse voices are part of this stage. Typical leader tasks here include monitoring the recruitment work basket, acknowledging applications as they come in, reviewing applications, and providing applicants with more information about the role and answering their questions. An applicant may show interest in a position after exchanging information with the leader, and then continued engagement will help them to get their questions answered and give them a chance to figure out what speaks to them about the position and if it could align with their individual goals. If they do decide to submit an application, you'll want to check that all the application requirements are included, and if not, let that applicant know what they're missing. But either way, make sure to confirm receipt of their application. We have another real-life example to share to illustrate some specific ways a leader is connecting with potential applicants and then building on those connections. Stephanie?
Thanks, Andy. So this is another example that also comes from VISTA leader Libby Gramlich at the Community Action Network in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So the Community Action Network uses that recruitment committee we talked about earlier. So they use that committee to develop a recruitment plan and spread the word widely in the community about the VISTA opportunities. But they use a single point of contact, their VISTA leader, for all communications with interested individuals. And the benefit of having Libby manage that communication is that she can respond quickly to every inquiry that comes in and provide standard and consistent information about available VISTA positions. Libby tracks all of the prospective applicants and pushes out communication with them regularly to help build their interest. She invites prospective applicants to follow the organization on social media. She shares the organization's newsletters and highlights items relating to the VISTA project. And along the way, Libby offers help and support as she also tries to gauge each person's interests to get them to apply and interview. And for those who do get to that stage in the process, Libby will send the VISTA newsletter that gives more detail about the other members in the project and their recent activities. We want to take a moment to thank Libby for sharing these examples with us so that we can pass them along to you.
All right, so moving on to step 4, this is the interview stage. And interviewing often takes place in stages, with some held by phone or virtually, using Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and then some of it happening in person. So as a leader, you're likely reviewing applications, maybe recommending particular applicants for interviews, and then setting up and scheduling those interviews, participating in them, and sharing your observations with your supervisor. An applicant may feel more comfortable communicating with the leader, and so you might get a request for an informational interview or a one-on-one conversation before the actual formal interview takes place. If possible, you should use these opportunities to get to know the candidate better, gauging their interest and fit, as well as their motivation to join AmeriCorps. At the end of the interview or as part of the follow-up, you can connect with the applicant by sharing an overview of the next steps in the process, giving them the time frame for those steps as well. And once candidates are interviewed, the program will want to select the candidate that they're going to bring on board. In this stage, leaders often recheck eligibility of the top candidates, provide their input to the supervisors, and it's the supervisor who will ultimately handle the official selection, including making offers and then completing the recommendation form and e-grants after the candidate accepts. Supervisors also need to notify applicants who were not selected So this is our second flag to make sure that these tasks are handled by supervisors, by the appropriate individuals. Leaders are not permitted to be the ones who decide which candidates are chosen. As I said, that's the responsibility of the supervisor or the project director. But leaders can connect once a person has been selected. So that perhaps could take the form of following up with selected applicants to make sure that they accept the position in my AmeriCorps. This is a step that some applicants miss, and if that happens, that can delay things. And if needed, you can, of course, offer them support in navigating my AmeriCorps so that they can finish that important step. And if an applicant is not selected, once they're notified of that, the leader could include the applicant in their network and refer them to other opportunities that might be a better fit for them. And finally, the last stage in the recruitment process is engage. Selected candidates need to be engaged as they navigate any time gap between the time where they're selected and then they actually get started in service. Leaders can help stay connected to these candidates, providing them information and reassurance so that they don't get nervous, panic, or just lose interest and maybe turn their attention somewhere else. So several ways you can do that. Deepening your connection by having touch points with members can really help them to stay excited. Again, in that time period between when they're selected, they're notified, but then they start serving, a few weeks later. This is also a good time to assess each member's needs, providing them with specific resources that would be helpful, or any reassurance that indeed they're making a good choice by serving. As we heard from someone who formerly had VISTA leader support, one of the things they appreciated was their leader's way of helping to assist with a smooth transition for new sites and new members. So this included contributing to member orientation and the ongoing support of the members. All right, so that brings us to the end of the 6-stage recruitment process. I've shared a bunch of ways that leaders can connect with, bond with, and engage prospective members throughout that recruitment cycle. So now I'm curious what you would do to engage a candidate who's just been approved to serve.
All right, so as Andy said, we want to give you an opportunity to put this information into practice. So here's a scenario that we want you to respond to in the chat. Let's say your sponsor has selected a candidate who's approved to start in a month. This candidate lives in another state and will be moving to your town, and they only know one other person in the area, a college friend. So in the chat, we'd like for you to share your ideas for ways that you would engage with this candidate in the next month. So go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat. All right, I'm starting to see some answers come in the chat. All right, they're starting to come in now, and I'm seeing some great ideas coming in. Andy, are there any of these that you want that are standing out to you as we start to see some come in?
Yeah, so I like the first of all the willingness of all you to really take time to help folks and to provide them with some personalized service. I love the idea of inviting people to lunch. Of course, if they're in your area, they're local and nearby, that could be a nice thing to do. And then, a couple of you have pointed out, like finding out, what they know and what they need to know, or finding out what their needs might be. So not assuming that you know what they need, but starting out with a little bit of a of a question, to offer support, but to find out what would be most useful for them. And then there's a lot of really practical ideas here, everything from, help, like suggestions around finding housing, actually taking them on a tour, maybe of the city or town, putting together a whole packet of information, making sure they understand the benefits that are available to them, all of them. So these are great ideas. I see a lot of kindness and a lot of practical support here that I think would be much appreciated. So thanks for sharing all these ideas. We do have one more question for you. Stephanie's going to share.
Yes, we want to give you an opportunity to see how well you followed along with the content from today's presentation. So you're going to see a poll question pop up on your screen. And on your screen, you're going to see 4 examples of types of connection building activities that could take place during the recruitment process. So we want you to pick the recruitment steps where that activity would make the most sense. So you're going to make a selection for each task and then click submit once you've made your choices. You'll be able to see those answers in the poll pop up on your screen, and we'll give you just a few moments for you to pick your answers. All right, I'm starting to see some answers roll in. It looks like about 25 to 30% of the folks on the call have participated so far. So keep going. We encourage you to keep taking some time to answer this poll. We'll keep it open for a little while longer just to make sure you all get the opportunity to answer. All right, it looks like we're starting to see some answers leveling off here. I see just over half of the folks on this call have responded. So this will be our last call. If you haven't gotten your answers in, I'll give you about 10 more seconds to get your responses in before we review what the answers are to this question. So if you haven't already, go ahead and submit your responses. And we're going to get ready to go ahead and close out the poll, and we'll show you what the correct answers are. All right, so providing technology support is part of the selection step. So you would do this while you're making sure your candidates actually accept the position in MyAmeriCorps. Writing ads to target specific populations, that's part of the marketing step. You'd want to do that while you're advertising available VISTA positions. Providing reassurance and beginning to identify your applicant's needs is part of that engagement step. So you want to stay engaged with that applicant throughout the process. And then finally, asking the applicant about their motivation to serve would be done during the interviewing step. So thank you all again for participating. I want to make sure we give you these answers you can compare to your responses, but we're going to move forward from here. All right, so we also want to make sure that we leave you with some resources that are related to what we covered today if you want to learn more about the topic of recruiting members. So the recommended resources are also listed in the handout. So the first resource that we have is an article that's called "It's All About Relationships: How Connecting Strengthens Your Recruiting." This article comes from the job recruiting site Indeed.com, and it looks at the importance of strong relationships in a workplace and specifically in recruiting new hires. So the next resource we have for you is Recruitment Best Practices, which comes from Service Year Alliance. And that resource gives some additional ideas about recruitment to specifically target national service recruitment. And finally, we have an article here that describes a study that was done by MIT, Harvard, and Stanford scientists to look at the impact of digital job sites on the labor market. And that article is called The Real Strength of Weak Ties. So that study found that it's helpful to reach out to people beyond your close connections when you're looking to recruit for a position. So each of these resources are listed on your handout. So as we get ready to close out for today, we want to recap what we've covered. Today, we covered how connections with potential applicants during the recruitment process can grow over time to be a good foundation for relationships with members that end up joining your organization. We also covered how leaders are uniquely poised to aid in recruitment and how important it is to tap into your networks. Finally, we looked at the appropriate roles for leaders in the recruitment process, and we looked at ways that you can deepen your connection with applicants throughout that process. So we are going to get to your questions in the Q&A in just a moment, but first I want to invite you to complete a short evaluation of this webinar. Your feedback will help us make these sessions the most useful they can be to you and to other leaders. So the survey may already be open in your browser window, but if it's not, the link is also available for you in the chat. So now we're going to see what questions you have. So for this Q&A session, we are going to use the chat feature. So go ahead and put any questions that you have in the chat. And if you don't see the chat panel, you can move your mouse cursor to the bottom of the screen and you'll be able to click on the chat icon from there. So Andy, while I take a moment to see what questions may have come up during our session today, were there any that stood out to you that you'd like to address first?
Yeah, well, not really a topic related question, but just a technical one. So yeah, I'm not sure why the handout wasn't accessible on the VISTA campus. So we're investigating that. We'll get that fixed. But I'll be emailing that out again. We'll have a list of all of your email addresses. So probably in the morning, by the time we have the report back from Zoom, I'll be able to send that out to you. So again, apologies that wasn't available during the session. There is that worksheet to get you thinking about your networks and identifying specifically who within your networks you can reach out to. So if you didn't get a chance to do that during the session, I invite you to go back and take a look at that. I think it's, it's just a nice activity, a good exercise to do to kind of, get you thinking beyond sort of usual suspects. And as Stephanie mentioned, we've got some additional resources there if you want to do a little bit further reading or study. So that's one piece I'll share. And I don't see any questions coming in. So again, if you have a question, anything you'd like to ask about, drop that in the chat now and we can take care of them.
Yes, and along the same lines, I'll also add that if you weren't able to get into the Jamboard activity, we will work on gathering the ideas that were shared so that we can share those out along with the handout. So just make a note there on the lines of tech issues. So we'll give another few seconds for folks to add questions to the chat. Andy, I saw you come off mute. Is there a question you saw that you'd like to address?
There is, yeah. So Shannon says, I went to a webinar about budgets and Mr. Smith noted that AmeriCorps hopes to implement a fully staffed recruitment staff. So first, what are examples of the kinds of positions that will be created? And secondly, will sponsors and or leaders have any form of contact with this staff? So I'll share what I know. I am not fully aware of what's happening all across the agency, but here within VISTA, we did create new positions that are recruitment associates, so they're regionally focused. The AmeriCorps agency is sort of divided the country into 8 regions. And so we have a recruitment associate assigned to each of those 8 regions. And they're doing a whole variety of things. They're reaching out to organizations. They're working directly with sponsors to help them fill challenging, hard to fill positions. They're also, and I should say, these are new positions that folks have only been in them for a few weeks in some cases. So they're still sort of getting their feet on the ground, but they're going to be working more to understand what some of their specific challenges are in recruitment. And then, as I said, they're providing some specific support for sponsors who are facing recruitment challenges. They're also doing, things like staffing job fairs and going out to organizations and universities and places where they can get the AmeriCorps name out there and really highlight VISTA positions in particular. Let's see, and will you have any form of contact? You may not have direct contact with them. It just depends. If a sponsor is facing particular challenges and would like some assistance, they can always let their portfolio manager know at the regional office, and the portfolio manager will then be able to determine what would be the most helpful kind of support. And if it makes sense, they'll make the connection to our regional recruitment associate.
Great, thanks for providing context on that question, Andy. I think we have a minute or two more for another question. I saw a question in the chat that said, earlier on the webinar, we mentioned that VISTA leaders don't select candidates. So the question is, does this apply only to selecting the candidate in eGrants, or should VISTA leaders be included in conversations with the sponsor about selecting the final candidate? Andy, what can you share about that question?
Sure. Leaders certainly can provide their observations and perspectives to the supervisor, project director, but the decision is ultimately with the sponsoring organization. So it's a staff member there who's making the choice, who's making the contact with that individual to let them know, and then taking the action in the grant. So a leader can certainly contribute to that, but they're not responsible for doing it.
Great, thank you, Andy. All right, so I think that's about the time that we have for questions today. So we want to thank you all again for your participation in today's webinar. We also want to give you some more information before we leave. We want to make sure we share when our next webinar is going to be. Our next webinar is going to be focused on orienting new VISTA members with intention. And that webinar is going to take place on Thursday, April 20th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We also want to share that there's a new feature on the VISTA Connect side of the VISTA campus that we want to make sure you're aware of. You can use the magnifying glass on the VISTA Connect home to search for other VISTA campus users by name, organization, or city. On the search results, you can find the person you're looking for and then click on private message. This is new and we want to highlight this for you. On the next screen, you can click request connection and your request will be sent. Once the other user confirms, you'll get a notification and you can then send private messages through the site. So we wanted to highlight this feature because it's one more way for you to connect with other leaders and other members on the VISTA campus. So thank you all again for your service and for your time and your participation today. This concludes today's webinar. And we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you at our next webinar.